and this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio! Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Do you or someone you know suffer from poor circulation, shortness of breath, or chest pains? Are you looking for a more natural solution to help overcome these problems? People tell us that after just a few months taking Extendivite, their doctors have noticed unexplainable improvements in their overall health. For more information, visit heartdrop.com or call 1-877-928-8822.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
And tell them Nighthawk sent you, because if you call this number and tell them Nighthawk sent you, you'll get $5 off your first order at extendivite.com. Thank you. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Do you feel as if you don't belong? Do you know you were meant for something more? Well, you were. Knowledge of who you are and where you really are from is within your reach. Join Janet Carol Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin as they search for the answers as they open up the Stargate to the cosmos.
Aloha and welcome to Stargate to the Cosmos on Revolution Radio, and I'm your host, Janet Carol Lessin, and my co-host is Dr. Sasha Lessin. Our producer is Thomas Becker. And today we have a very special guest, Michael Macintosh. And he's a very interesting person. He claims to be a time traveler that was part of a top-secret experiment in which he got a chance to see the future. Along with alleging to be a time traveler, Michael also says he's going to be a future president of the United States. And according to his YouTubes, it looks like it might be 2024. So, as you're well aware, on this show, we've interviewed Andrew DiVashago a number of times over the 5-6 years. And Andrew DiVashago says he will be he is a future presidential candidate, and he is launching his candidacy for 2024. He's going to skip 2020, and he's going to start promoting for 2024. So before we bring on Michael, I want to talk to Sasha. Are you there? Dr. Lessin, sound check.
Yes, indeed, I am. And I've had some real interesting questions in my mind. That is, if time is a spurious or just an idea that we have so that we can parse out the stimuli that we access, and there's no such thing as time, it's merely our concept, then are we really time traveling or just exploring parallel thoughts or patterns in our own mind? And the same with spatial travel. Are these merely figments of our mind, or is our mind part of a whole much larger thing in which time is merely one of our conveniences? Anyway, I hope Michael can answer some of those questions for me.
Yes, that is oh goodness, we're getting the feedback again. Let's see if Michael's okay with that feedback. Michael, welcome to the show. Yeah, we're going to have a lot of questions for you. We'd like you to start and have you talk about your experiences, how you got involved in the time travel program. Are you from this timeline? Were you born? When were you born? Those type of things. So welcome aboard and start giving us a little background. Then in about 10 minutes or so, Dr. Lessin and I will start asking you some questions. Welcome, Michael.
Okay, thank you for having me. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Great. Thanks,
I
Janet.
figured out the feedback.
Okay, great. Well, where would you like to start? I was born in 1974. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. So right now I'm 44 years old. And I became involved in, I guess, what you would call top secret programs as a very young child. I was actually in kindergarten. I know.
Yeah, and we know that about this secret space program, super soldiers. A lot of them get recruited when they're very young. So how were you recruited? How did you get involved?
Well, let me see. Well, if we're talking specifically about the teleportation program or the time travel program, they're two distinctly different things. At least in my case, I don't know which one you'd like to focus on.
Whichever one you want to start with. We're going to cover it all. Well, go ahead.
I suppose we'll start with the one that came first, which is the time travel experiment, shall we call it? I was living in Calgary, actually, Western Canada, in Alberta. I was in kindergarten at the time, and my very first camping trip in the Rocky Mountains, it was the middle of the night. I came out of my tent. I was with my parents and my sister, and I came out of my tent at something like 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep. I was a restless child, and I wanted to see the landscape because I had never seen anything like it before, being living in the city. So I went out into the wilderness to look at the sky in the middle of the night, and I have this very clear memory of a gigantic craft basically materializing out of nowhere, and it was literally the size of a city block, maybe a football field. And it was like that movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Basically, it was this craft floating in the sky. It was me just sitting there looking at it, wondering what the heck I was looking at. I was only about, I think I had maybe just turned 6. Maybe I was still 5 at the time. Mm-hmm. It was the summer of, probably 1980, actually. I was, I guess, about 5, just turning 6. So I remember that. That was my first encounter with sort of unexplainable phenomenon, at least at the time.
Did they take you on board to craft? Do you think you were beamed on board?
At that point, I don't think I was actually taken on board. I don't have a memory of that, so I think if I were taken on board, I would have accessed that memory by now, despite any sort of memory suppression technology that would have been used on me. But it's certainly possible that I just don't remember it. But then a few weeks later, literally a few weeks later, I was at home this time in our tiny, semi-detached house in Calgary in the city, and it was again like 2 a.m, and I literally felt myself floating, like outside into the sky, like a sort of a tractor beam or something like that was pulling me out of my bed and through the wall. And next thing I know, I'm on this craft, and it was, basically like what you see in the depictions of the Roswell incident. It was the same type of craft and the same type of beings. And I have memories of literally, going all over space and time at that point, and then literally being put back into the same time and place that I had been taken from, but that a very long period of time had passed from the point in time in which I was picked up until I was put back.
Was it like hours, weeks, years? How long passed?
Well, it sounds. I'm sure it sounds crazy to a lot of people, but it. I really believe that I had gone on a journey that in real time had lasted perhaps thousands of years, 100,000 years, perhaps even, and that I had been put back. Yeah, I know, and that I had been put back into the moment from which I was taken from. So
we've actually heard many stories like that. I know you may have heard about those before, but we've heard many stories about people being returned and regressed back to the age they were when they were taken.
Right. I certainly believe that advanced civilizations would have the technology to do that. I mean, we're not that far from doing so ourselves. So, but then, I was put back, and then from that point onward, I was sort of throughout my childhood, regularly visited by these same beings wherever I happened to be living. I moved around a lot as a child, so, but they still somehow managed to find me wherever I was. I'm not sure how. Maybe they put a tracking device in me somewhere or something like that. I have no idea, but
that's what they typically do.
Yeah,
so you were talking about the Zetas with the gray aliens with the large eyes.
Yes.
Yeah, about how tall were they?
Well, I'm trying to remember. The first time I saw them, I suppose I was 5 years old, so they were taller than me. I was five or six. I suppose they would have been about the height of, say, a human entering, adolescence. On the average, some were taller, some were shorter. And I know at later points I have seen ones that were actually taller, along with ones that were significantly shorter. But at that point in time, they were all sort of, at least in my memory right now that I'm having, about that height of, say, an average 12, 13-year-old human. But I was only 5 or 6 at the time, so this is difficult for me to remember the exact specifics. But I do remember communication that I had with these beings, which is very interesting.
What was it like?
And well, they probably, I think that they communicated to me basically that they would have kept me with them, but that I had some issues to work out. So they put me back, perhaps in order to work out those issues. I don't know. I think I have, for some reason, since early childhood, probably relating to traumatic experience, I have sort of anger issues that I constantly have to keep in check and work on, and they were a little scared of my anger, so they put me back.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Were they talking to you in language, or was it telepathic, or how did they communicate with you?
It was telepathic communication through telepathy, and and so, but here's the thing: at that point, when they had taken me, I had been to and observed a future point in human history, in Earth history, not too far from now, maybe like 50, 100 years from now or so, and having, and I had accessed somehow, or had been shown a history record of times coming up, and I had been shown by these beings that I somehow myself would play, or at least be a participant in a very important time in human history, and be sort of a recognized figure, perhaps a leader of some sort, and be sort of remembered in the history books for some things that I would do or be a participant in. They weren't. It wasn't too clear and specific at that point. Mm-hmm. But this is where I kind of started to realize that maybe there was something different about me as a person, and that I was meant for something. If that makes any sense.
Yes. Uh-huh.
But then later on, literally a few months after that, the second experience, the first time that I was taken aboard a craft, I was sitting in my kindergarten class, and some men in black came in and asked me to come and help them with some project. They needed my help for something. They asked me a few questions. For some reason, they asked me if I was Irish. They wanted to know if I was Irish, which I am as well. My mother is actually from Dublin, so I'm a dual U.S. Irish citizen. So they were definitely interested in me and something that I had to offer. So they asked me for my help, and so I said sure, and I went with them to this. We got in a car and drove to a warehouse, where I was then teleported from this warehouse to a building that I later discovered was in El Segundo, California, where I was then introduced to a young Barack Obama, who I guess was a student at a nearby college. And then we went into this building, went up several floors to a floor where there was an elevator. Went in the elevator and were teleported to an underground cavern close to the surface of Mars. Where I was then...
Did they tell you were going to Mars? How did you know it was Mars where you were teleported to?
No, they did not tell me.
Okay.
I mean, I later figured it out because it just seemed like where else could that have been? And I, putting two and two together, kind of figured out that I had actually been teleported to Mars. But there's some interesting things happened while we were there, and I'm trying to get this all in as little time as possible because I probably have.
What I want to know is, when you say you were on Mars, did it smell like anything? Did it taste like anything? How did your body feel in terms of warmth and cold? What were the clues that made you piece it together where you were?
Well, I didn't realize at the time. I only figured out later on. I mean, I was 6 years old. I didn't really know what was going on, frankly. But I knew that I was just there to help. I was being asked to help grown-ups, and what child doesn't want to help grown-ups? You know what I mean? It's a natural child thing. So I was helping these grown-ups with something. They wanted me to, under the direction of this man who I later discovered was then future President Barack Obama, I was used to remote view the surface of Mars using these sort of parapsychological abilities that I have that are inherent, innate abilities that I have. I was able to remote view the surface and also chronovise, like to look backward and forward in time at a specific location that I was asked to focus on. And I was part of the discovery of the fact that there was at one point a civilization on Mars. And this I recently found out was documented in a declassified CIA paper that talks about remote viewing of the surface of Mars, which was transcribed in 1984. I remember clearly that Obama was talking either to somebody or recording with a device. Somehow he was able to psychologically link up with my mind and interpret what I was seeing and record it or report it to somebody, and then it was later transcribed and documented in a recently declassified document, which you can look up online. Just look for.
What's it called?
If you just Google search CIA remote viewing Mars declassified document 1984, it was transcribed in 1984 after the experience in 1981. It's easily available online.
I'll look for that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's there. And then here's an interesting thing. After we did that remote viewing session, 2 more people came up to the surface via the teleport. One of those was Andy Basiago, who I literally met Andy on the surface of Mars the same day that I met Barack Obama. Now,
did they introduce you to these people? How did you know their names?
Wait, you didn't say who the other one was. Who was the other one? Who was the other?
Too. Yeah.
There was another person there. And
was
this
it
is
Regina?
well, excuse me?
Was it Regina?
No.
Don't witness. No. Who was the second person?
The other person was my future self.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So this is where it starts to get a little crazy because I
And
at
how
that
old was your
point
future self?
older than I am right now, but not a whole lot older. Maybe in my early 50s, late 40s, I suppose. I didn't really know who these people were. I just remembered their faces. I don't forget faces.
Mm-hmm.
I was never told what any of these people's names were or anything like that, and I sort of wonder if Andy even knew who the other person was. I think he might have thought it was a person named Courtney Maurice Hunt, which is which is certainly an alias that I myself would use in the future if I ever were to time travel back to, say, 1981 and teleport to the surface of Mars with then 19-year-old Andy Basiago.
This is fun.
Yeah. Isn't it fun? Yeah, this is really funny. Mm-hmm. But let's see. Well, once those two other people got there, 5-year-old me and Obama and the two other people all went out onto the surface of Mars through what I think was a hole in the rock or something. And we were out there on the surface of Mars without breathing apparatus, without need for, radiation protection or anything like that. There's an atmosphere there that is perfectly suitable for human life. However, the thing that would make it hostile to human life is the fact that there are other species on the planet, which we quickly found out when some of them started to discover our presence and came to try to eat us. So, I believe it might have been Andy and my older self had weapons and started shooting at them. And so younger me, 5-year-old me, started getting a little irate, and I said, "What am I doing here?" And then 19-year-old Obama said, said something to the effect of, "We got to get him out of here. We got to get him back." But I remember something that Andy said when he came up. Initially, he asked to Obama, pointing at me, "What's he doing here?" As though he knew who I was and that I really shouldn't have been there. Which technically I really shouldn't have been. My presence there on the surface of Mars as a 5 or 6-year-old child was, especially the fact that I hadn't even been living in the United States, and I was effectively drafted as a 6-year-old kindergartner living in Canada into a top secret U.S. military project was certainly not the most legal of things.
Right, I was going to ask you, how did they even get you out of school? I mean, what teacher would deliver a young child to some people? Did you get any information on that?
Right. Well, I mean, it's been discovered that over time our government has teleported as many as 100,000 people to the surface of Mars, most of whom have died. Probably as a way to ensure that Mars is a legally recognized United States territory, and thus our government can lay claim to it because we've had a continuous presence on the planet. I think that this is what this is all about.
People die? Around 100,000 people. Do you know what was the major cause of death?
I would presume that most of them were eaten by the creatures that are up there. There are creatures, and there's another sort of humanoid species up there. We'll just call them the Martians because they're like us. They're people. They just look very different, and they communicate differently. They communicate through telepathy, and I was able to sort of temporarily lock on to one of them while I was up there mentally, and gain some communication from them. And they really are sort of regretful of the fact that their ancestors blew up their civilization, and they really wish for humanity to travel to Mars and help them rebuild their civilization. That was really the gist of the communication I got from the Martian humanoid species. The other creatures just wanted to eat everything.
Right, they were just very primal.
Yeah, they're not very advanced. They're just hungry and eat, and that's about it.
Did the U.S. seem to have any kind of permanent colony there? I've heard from other people like Randy Kramer, and Penny Bradley, they had some colonies there, but that could be a different part. It's a big planet, but did you see any permanent colonies there or ruins from previous colonies?
I didn't see that, but I did when we got there see that there had already been people there because there were tools and equipment and boxes of this and that and the other stored in the underground cavern that we were in. So it was sort of obvious that people had already been there before I got there. Although I may have been one of the first remote viewers to kind of really figure out that there had been a previous civilization there, and it just I think that they really chose me or selected me because I had been recognized somehow as having this remote viewing ability, and I'm not too sure that it's that common or that it was that common in children in the late 70s, early 80s. So I kind of get the impression that that's why I was selected for it.
Well, it seems just to interject here that first the ship that they were scanning you, and they are looking for people that are telepathic, they're naturally telepathic.
Right.
And so when you were scanned, they probably realized that you have this. Not everybody can instantly communicate telepathically with other beings, and then you have the remote viewing skills. So that's probably why they came and got you. But I'm wondering if your teachers might have been kind of zombied out so they would let you be taken, because that doesn't seem like normal behavior. That's a venom lifetime, and they let a child be taken out of their kindergarten. What are your thoughts on that?
It's certainly possible. I'm having difficulty remembering all of the details of how I got out of my class and into the car to drive to the warehouse. I remember leaving the classroom and sitting in a very small office in the school for a couple of minutes with a man who had like a clipboard and a checklist, and he was asking me some questions. And I think maybe they were just trying to make sure that somehow their butts were covered legally, and that I was the right sort of candidate for it. So, I mean, I was just a child at the time, and a child just does naturally want to help people. I think that's just in the nature of a child. I have a 5-year-old son myself, and he likes to help me clean up, and it's just in his nature. And I think all children are like that, So
we've heard from other people. Do you want to help be part of Disclosure and work with the Greys? And yes. And then some of them are taken into the secret space program military, and next thing you know, they're fighting aliens. So you were lucky because you're a telepath. You're part of the Psi Corps. So the Psi Corps are the most revered because they are very plentiful. I mean, that's what I'm getting. So
Interesting.
Yeah. So, Sasha, any questions or comments before we continue the story?
No, it seems so interesting that the story Andy tells us is similar, but some of the names have been changed. Like the guy, he's protecting the other fellow, while the person that's helping him, he says, is William Whitecrow.
Well, I mean, I think Andy, if you talk to him, he has said that he did teleport many times to and from Mars, so maybe it was different people at different times.
Yeah,
that's definitely true.
The two incidents. He talks about specifically these diving pterodactyl type things that he and Whitecrow were shooting down, while that other fellow just sort of who was just sort of didn't have a weapon and was just crouched down so he wouldn't get killed.
Well, there's lots of dangerous beings apparently on the surface of Mars. At least it's just like the Earth. Some places you're going to run into tigers, and other places you're going to run into bears. So, you're not exactly sure where you were. Did you see the creatures that wanted to eat you? Or
yeah, I did.
What did they look like?
They sort of resembled something like a cross between a T-Rex and a scorpion.
Okay.
Something like that. Not really. That's not really the most accurate, but that's the closest. That's not really completely accurate, but that's the closest I can think of right off the top of my head. I'm not a very wilderness animal sort of person. I've led a very sort of urbane existence since then, but those are the closest things I could compare it to. And they were fast. I mean, they were really fast. I'm sure that it would be easy for them to, gobble up 80,000 people very easily.
Yeah. Wow.
But I guess it was my heightened sense of awareness that helped us be protected from them, because immediately I knew that it was just really stupid for us to be out there, and I spoke up. I said, what am I doing here? Why are we here? And immediately Obama knew that I knew what I was talking about, and that we were in grave danger, and that we shouldn't hang around and just start shooting guns. We should get the hell out of there, which is interesting.
Listen, Michael, Andy was saying that there was these lanes with metal siding that he could walk on, and the one kid that got eaten while he was there slid off the siding, and a predator ate them. So I just wonder if you saw those lanes that he was talking of.
No, I don't remember anything like that. I mean, we were only out on the surface for literally a few minutes because of the impending danger. And then we went back to the cavern, and we were then, went back in the teleporter. It looks like an elevator, basically. We went in there, and then we were back down in California in a matter of moments.
Did anybody debrief you with what you saw because you were a remote viewer? Did you?
No, I was not told anything. I was not told what was happening. I wasn't told people's names. I wasn't told where I was. I was not told anything. I was just asked if I would help them. And sure, I said sure, and it took me. There's another thing. When I was teleported back to the warehouse in Calgary, and from that point I was. They used this like memory suppression technology on me, which completely suppressed all of these memories for, you're talking close to 37 or 8 years. Which led to me sort of having I have to say, a very depressed, unhappy existence from that point onward up until literally just a couple of years ago. And I didn't know why I had this this constant depression until I actually ended up somehow, I can't remember exactly how, but I got in contact with Andy Basiago.
Oh.
Again, a couple of years ago, and he told me his story, and I think somehow it was meant, like him getting in touch with me was meant to jog my memory and help me uncover these suppressed memories. I mean, I definitely believe in God, and I think ultimately he's in control of all of these things, whatever you want to call him, her, it. The force of creation is ultimately in control of everything, and maneuvers things in a way that makes sense for the person uncovering the truth of what they're uncovering the truth of. And for me, that's what I needed to really kind of realize that this had actually happened to me, and that there was a reason why I was depressed, and it was because of the memory suppression. And when I started to remember, my almost lifelong depression went away completely, and I've been fine since. It's amazing.
Oh, that's great. Now, yeah. Did Andy get in touch with you, or you get in touch with him?
I'm trying to remember, and I can't remember exactly, honestly. I think what happened was I came across his social media presence, and we ended up talking. And we had several very lengthy chat conversations via Skype and Facebook, and before that, I had actually worked sort of informally with the Obama administration.
Tell us about that.
Not really realizing that I had already met Obama, and in fact, I had met him. I had met him after that too, because it seems as though he and I think Andy were checking in on me periodically over the course of my life. Whether they will admit that or not is another thing entirely. But I do believe that they were checking up on me.
So have you done any regression work on this to try to uncover memories or meditation? What do you do to get additional memories back?
I have. I've done a lot of it. And it is, coming back very clearly. I had really, the most difficult thing was to fight through the Wernicke's commands that they put in when they suppress your memory to try to make sure that you don't. Wernicke's commands. Wernicke's commands. WERNICKE''S. There's sort of these subconscious triggers that are implanted in your mind that say, don't remember this or you'll become sick. If you remember this, somebody will die. If you remember this, you'll commit suicide. If you remember this, bad things will happen. So the inclination then is to not want to remember because you associate it with a potentially painful experience. But for me, I'm a redhead, so
yeah.
Pain is not really a huge deal to me. You know what I mean? So I really got through the Wernicke's commands once I started to put a few of the pieces together. I started to get through those very easily. I was sick for about 2 weeks when I started to remember everything, and it was really like, you know, there was no reason I should have been sick, but I was. It was because I was struggling to remember and fight the programming that I had been subjected to.
Well, we're hypnotherapists, and we work with people that have programming, and I didn't know that we were called Wernicke's commands, but we've encountered this over. But sometimes people, they just start talking nonsense. That's another thing that happens. So, but yours was triggered to get sick. Yeah, a lot of people get sick. They just, Okay, so you work through this because you're a strong redhead, Irish redhead.
Yeah. And
okay, so I took you off of the Obama thing, them tracking you. We'll go back to that. I just want to make sure you were complete with that thread. So they were checking on you. So does Obama have clear memories that you know, or do you think they use these suppression, mind wipe type things? What are your thoughts?
I do believe that probably Barack Obama has been subjected to very serious programming, and that even if he were to remember these experiences, he would probably never talk about them, especially relating to me, because of the fact that my involvement in any of this is completely illegal, because I was a small child, and I know that publicly it would be detrimental for anybody involved in this who was an adult at the time to admit that there was a 5 or 6 year old child hanging around in advanced technological programs. So it will be very difficult to get any of these people to fess up. But if they're listening to this, Barack or Andy, if you guys are listening to this, I want you to know that, you know, I don't hold it against you, because you guys were basically kids too. So it's not really your fault. There's nothing to be afraid of from me. I'm not someone to be afraid of. You know, I'm an understanding sort of person, and I understand. You know, even as a 19-year-old, 20-year-old, early 20-something, it's very difficult to say no to authority figures.
Well, they make you feel like you're doing something to, really help people. You're a patriot. You're a good citizen. You're a good person. Right. You're the hero. So they really pump you up, and then they might wipe you anyway, so you don't remember it, and then you're doing it again. So a lot of people have these dual lives where they're doing all these fantastical things,
right,
in between their regular 3D lives. So we forgive everybody, because they're somehow recruited into this. And I literally have dozens and dozens, up to the hundreds of people coming out now, and they have been. Same thing happened. They're recruited when they're very young. They're taken out of their beds, and it's an interesting story. Okay, so back to yours. So you said you worked with Obama. Did you work with Obama while he was president?
While he was president, yes. And in fact, I had met him, and I believe Andy, while he was a student at Harvard University. I grew up in the Boston area. My family, for about 30 or 40 years, had a restaurant in, like, an Irish bar, actually, in sort of on the Harvard University campus. And I'm pretty sure Obama used to come in, and I had met him then again. And I think that he somehow was aware of the fact that we had met before when I was a child, but he didn't say anything or point that out. But I remember him at one point being there talking to, I think, Andy, who was there also, and he was asking Andy, "Is that him?" Like pointing at me. Well, I was like 12 or 13 at the time. I worked very part-time at that restaurant and bar, and I think they were.
Do you remember the name of the restaurant?
Oh yeah, of course. It's called the Plow and Stars in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's a very famous sort of local hangout. A lot of really well-known bands have started out there, played their first shows there. A lot of very notable political figures, not just in local political, not just in the Boston political scene, but the American and indeed global political world have been, regulars at the place. It's a very widely known place. In fact, the guy who was the cook while I was working there ended up being the his name was Jared Barrios. He ended up being he was a Harvard law student at the time, and he ended up being the man who was pretty much single-handedly at first behind the legalization of gay marriage. So very sort of political, political hangout.
Right.
So
but back to your meeting with Andy and Barack, and so how old were they at that time? Approximately, they were in college.
Yeah, I suppose they would have. Obama would have been at Harvard University, so that was the late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
I was like 12, 13. I was still, middle school, high school kid. Living in the suburbs of Boston. And do
you have any inkling of what your mission was when you were interacting with them later, or was it just you were just to run into each other? Yeah.
At that point, are you talking in the 80s and 90s? That would have been.
Yeah. Did you have additional work that you did off planet or time traveling or anything?
No, I think they were just checking in on me. They were. I'm pretty sure that they were just sort of. Maybe they had found out somehow that I was working at this place, and they came in to check up on me because they knew of my involvement in the program before, and probably due to both of their experience with time travel, who I would be in the future as well, and who I believe I'm yet to be in the future, which is President of the United States for 4 years in 2024. I don't really want the job, frankly, but I think somehow I'm going to end up with it. I know that's.
Why do you just get one term?
Well, who wants two?
Almost all the guys, even U.S. Grant, everybody wants two.
Yeah, that's too long. I mean, look at how much damage George W. Bush did in 8 years, and Barack Obama. Frankly, how much damage Barack Obama did in 8 years. Why would anybody want to hurt our country that badly? I don't know.
I agree that 4 years is a lot better for everybody, but most politicians used to being powerful.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a politician, so I'm not a politician. I will never be a politician, frankly, and I think I have more in common with perhaps Donald Trump than political types of people. I mean, I've never even voted. I have never voted. I did not. Yeah, and then,
you said that, was it you that said that Martin Luther King's granddaughter will follow you in 2028 or something like that?
I definitely believe that we already know who some of the future U.S. presidents are, yes. And one of those is Martin Luther King Jr.'s, I believe, great-granddaughter, Yolanda Renee King. And I'm pretty sure I know who a few others are in the future. I believe Andy
we'll have to talk about that after the break. Yeah, but go ahead. Andy will...
Well, I believe...
Go ahead.
I believe Andy will be in for 8 years from 2032 until 2040. And after, yeah. And believe it or not, I think after him will be Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Wow, we're going to be changing some rules.
We are definitely...
Age, citizenships.
Well, we're definitely going to change the law about age. But I think what's really going to happen is we're just going to clarify what the Constitution already says, which is that anyone who is a citizen of the United States can be president of the United States. It's just our law is not, it's not taught clearly, and people have a misunderstanding of what it means.
Well, hold that thought. We're going to come back with more of this and how you get to be president. Thank you very much, listeners. We'll be back in 5 minutes after this commercial break.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
In breaking news, a visiting Syrian diplomat reported today that their population is evolving rapidly and advancing into a fifth-dimensional consciousness. They are seeking peace with all cosmic cultures, which may mean that the Earth will be asked to join the prestigious Galactic Federation of Light Alliances. Please join Debbie West and Michael Hathaway on Lost Knowledge, Saturdays, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Studio A, for the latest breaking news on the Star Visitors' peaceful contact and the ongoing project of cleansing the Earth.
Who are you? I am the architect. I created the Matrix. I've been waiting for you. Why am I here? You are the eventuality of an anomaly which, despite my sincerest efforts, I have been unable to eliminate from what is otherwise a harmony of mathematical precision, which has led you inexorably here. You haven't answered my question. The Matrix is older than you know. As you are undoubtedly gathering, the anomaly is systemic, creating fluctuations in even the most simplistic equation. Choice. The problem is choice.
Right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Be here Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for Private Eye Matrix Revealed with Monique Lessin.
Hello, my name is Mr. Rowe. I am the host of Reality Extraction on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I utilize logic, intellect, and magic to methodically atomize, vivisect, analyze, examine, study, scrutinize, and extract an essence of reality from a fog of illusion and confusion. You can find me on Studio B every Thursday at 1700 hours Pacific Time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern. No topic taboo, no subject too strange. I strive to take a neutral standpoint during the dissection of the topic at hand. That's Reality Extraction with Mr. Rowe on Revolution Radio.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we are listener-sponsored and commercial-free. But there still are bills to pay. In order to raise some needed funds to cover the cost, our station is offering a silver special. In the continental United States for a $60 donation, or in Alaska, Hawaii, or Canada for a $70 donation, we will send you an uncirculated 2018 1-ounce pure silver Eagle. The $70 donation, the extra 10 is to cover shipping, by the way, outside of the continental United States. When making the donation, you must put Silver Eagle promo in the notes on the donation. And thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio and freedomslips.com. Without you, there is no us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Collision Course is back. Schedule will be on Revolution Radio every Saturday night, 6 to 8 p.m. You get outer space. You get honest answers, real researchers, truthful answers, and a place to engage with questions. Take part in the discussion. Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com hosts Collision Course every Saturday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific Time.
Do you or someone you know suffer from poor circulation, shortness of breath, or chest pains? Are you looking for a more natural solution to help overcome these problems? People tell us that after just a few months taking Extendivite, their doctors have noticed unexplainable improvements in their overall health. For more information, visit heartdrop.com or call 1-877-928-8822.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
And tell them Nighthawk sent you, because if you call this number and tell them Nighthawk sent you, you'll get $5 off your first order at extendivite.com. Thank you. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha and welcome back to Stargate to the Cosmos with your host Janet Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin, and our producer Thomas Becker, and our guest is Michael Macintosh, and we're talking about who's going to be president in the future and time travel and teleportation. But before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to go over to that donation button on revolution.radio and make your donation. Today, we really need it. We need your funds to keep us on the air, to keep bringing shows like these to you. And a Mad Painter, Thomas Becker, how are we doing with our fundraising?
We haven't raised nothing in like 4 days. It's really sad. We got 1501. We need 2450.
Get on over. Donate $5. Cheaper than a cup of coffee at Starbucks. All right.
Well, what's Starbucks?
People. Yeah, what's Starbucks? I don't go to Starbucks. Sasha, you want to say something before we bring Michael back on? I got a couple questions for Michael, but go ahead. What would you like to say? I was still.
Well, I'd like to say something. I'd like to say something.
Something.
Well, besides that, the first part of the show we talked about teleportation, and I would like to hear about time travel. This side.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go back to time travel, and I want to just wrap up a couple of questions about the presidency. We can come back anytime, but so you let's see. We were talking during the break. So why Michael before Andy? What happens that you go, because Andy's older than you.
He is older than I am.
Going to be president. Mm-hmm.
And he will be for 8 years, probably, in 2032. He will be certainly a very well-loved president, a really great president. He will be the president of the country when a lot of technology is made public, because by that point it will be completely safe to do so. Right now, and for the foreseeable future, at least in the very short term to me being 10 years or so, we're gonna the whole world is going to change very dramatically, I believe. And right now we still have issues with not just global terrorism, but we have issues with even right now, Trump is cleaning out the deep state, which has been working against our country and our people for a long time. And basically attempting to sabotage any sort of natural progress that our country and people would make. So we have a lot of work to do ahead of us. I think
what the deep state is, because it's always been confusing.
Sure.
What is the deep state? Wait, can't hear you, Sash. What? Ask the question after he answers this one. Go ahead. What is the deep state? Everybody keeps talking about it. I don't even know what it is. What is it?
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's not clear what it is. I mean, some people think it's a faction of the Illuminati, it's the Archons, it's the Royals, it's the President. I mean, there's so many theories about what really is the deep state. It's part of the breakaway civilization. It's the Nazis that are in.
It's
programs. Yeah.
At this point, it's a conglomerate of things that are working collectively to undermine the spirit and nature of the United States of America, which is to protect freedom for not just its citizens, but but be sort of a guiding light, if you will, for freedom for the rest of humanity. And they've been trying to shut that down since 1776, basically, haven't they? Really, let's be honest. But we've reached a point where their time is pretty much up. I mean, Donald Trump is doing so much right now that the media just doesn't even talk about. People have been arrested, tried, put away in jail, all because of actively working against the United States of America. Some of these people being former presidents, including George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush, possibly Barack Obama is in prison right now because of treasonous activity against the United States of America. And this is happening all across the board in Washington, D.C.
So who's walking around? Are they clones? We've been hearing about clones.
Who's walking around? They
have clones. Yeah, if there's somebody walking around that, like Obama's seen getting on a plane, or
yeah.
Who is that? Is that a clone? Apparently, they have clones of all the major figures.
Yeah, well, there certainly is cloning going on. I would assume that probably there are clones of Barack Obama, but the actual Barack Obama is likely in prison in Guantanamo Bay right now because of some of the things he got up to as president. specifically relating to the events of September 11th, 2001. It's come out now that our very own government, including George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Michael Chertoff, and a number of other traitorous Americans and either dual Israeli or Israeli intelligence were the perpetrators of 9/11, and that it wasn't some Arab Muslims with box cutters, and that was a gigantic lie. This has been...
Well, we know that they've had that plan to do that since the 70s. They did mock trials, make it. So that's when George is a little kid.
Right. Well,
there's really like somebody even beyond that. Like those are the puppets.
Right.
Where's the puppet master?
Well, these people made money. The puppet master is probably George Soros, right? I think that's been established. But so these people are either have been arrested or are in the process of being arrested and tried, and we're probably never going to hear from a lot of these people ever again because they're just going to disappear, or they're going to have staged funerals like George H.W. Bush did, where he was actually executed, or John McCain, who was actually also executed. You're going to probably hear a lot of these types of things coming up in the very near future because, these people have to be taken out of the government for the United States of America to move forward and to help usher in an era of progress for not just for America but for the rest of humanity. And their agenda is either to keep it all to themselves or to maintain the status quo, which is an oppressive system that has been gradually ushered in, contrary to the initial spirit of the Constitution of the United States of America. So it's going to take 8 years for these people to be gotten rid of, and that's why we're going to have Donald Trump in again, I think. Whether or not they try to impeach him, that's another thing. But I think whoever takes his place will certainly just continue his work until it's completely done. And I would certainly know how to do that myself, and not just that, but not just take care of those problems domestically, but take care of those problems worldwide. Because of my experience and training with military. I come
tell us about your experience and training in the military. Yeah, we need to get that piece of the story.
I come from a very, very, very long line of military people. I mean, my family have been involved in military in some capacity for probably hundreds of years at this point. Going back to, some of my family were on the Mayflower. Some of my family fought in the American Revolution, the Civil War, the War of 1812, etc., etc. All of the wars.
It's the same thing with my family.
Yeah.
We go back to Mayflower.
Right.
John Shook fought in the Civil War. Yeah.
And then some of my family were Irish, and they fought against the British to get the British government out of Ireland. So I'm sort of like a genetic mix of just revolutionaries from all over the place. But so it's sort of in my nature to know how to take care of these things. Whereas perhaps for somebody else, it might not be a natural thing. For someone like me as commander-in-chief, I would be very easily able to take care of a lot of these problems in under 4 years, because I do not sleep. And one thing about the Irish you really should know is we know how to fight. don't piss off an Irishman, or you're in big trouble, especially if he's got an army at his disposal. It's just it's a losing game.
Well, the Irish are a special genetic culture.
Right.
Anyway, if you go back in history, apparently that was like an Anunnaki Enki colony after the Battle of Sodom and Gomorrah and stuff like that. So that faction went up there. So they're very special fighters. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
And,
so you've got this background, and you're going to come in. Now, how do you go from your normal regular? What do you do with your life now? You're like a dad. You have 2 kids.
Yeah. Well, I had been working for sort of as a kitchen cabinet member for the Obama administration, actually.
What does that mean, a kitchen cabinet member?
Well, he has the president has his official cabinet, and then he has people who are the kitchen cabinet, who are his actual advisors, but don't officially hold a position in the government. I was basically the go-to person for advice on military strategy on all of the campaigns that Obama was successful with during his 8 years. That was pretty much me.
So how were you? Were you living there? Were you living in the area? Were you in Washington? Did they call you on the phone? How did they get to your advice?
They have ways. I don't know if it's smart to go into the specifics of how the president taps people for advice on how to solve problems. I think that might pose a security risk, so I don't know if I should tell you. But I will say that it was. I will say that it was basically me that was his main advisor for all of his successful military campaigns. And let me emphasize successful ones. Some of them were failures, and some of them were very big mistakes. Like he armed some of the wrong people. He probably shouldn't have been giving weapons to certain groups. That was not my idea. I'm pretty sure I would if he had.
So I got to go back in time. So you guys last met when he was in Harvard, and then all of a sudden he's calling you. How did you get reconnected with him? We need to get that piece of the story.
Well, like I said, I think somehow they know who I am, and they just know how to get a hold of me whenever they need me for something, basically. And I'm sure they've been following me for a long time now.
And how did they know you knew military stuff, and how did you gain military knowledge besides instinctual? What did you have any? Were you in the military? Was your father in the military? What was
well, my dad was military. My grandparents were military. My great grandparents were military. It's just a culture that I grew up in, basically. It has a lot to do with the fact that I moved around a lot as a child.
So were they in? Did you go to military bases?
No.
Yeah. Were you on?
Well, we always were off the bases, but everything was connected to either military or government somehow. Even in my adult life, when jobs that I've had were always connected either to government or military in some capacity. Usually. But primarily, interestingly, what I do, what my primary focus is for work, and has been for the last 18 years, is Christian ministry work. I know that sounds sort of contrary to being a military advisor, but The two are strangely connected.
Yeah, that's an interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how they're connected, but okay. So but I've heard various things, on that line as well.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you were working as a kitchen cabinet member for Obama for 8 years. So you advised him not to do certain things, and he went ahead and did it anyway. And they were the unsuccessful campaigns.
Well, those were the things that I didn't advise him on, actually. He didn't ask my advice and went ahead with certain things that ended up being fairly disastrous. But when he did ask my advice... So what was his crime?
Yeah, so he did these... Was that his crime, why he ended up in Guantanamo and he's got a clone walking around? Or what was his crime?
Well, he has been... It's been determined by, I believe, the Trump administration and certain of the district courts that he actually knew what happened during 9/11 and assisted in the cover-up of the evidence.
Okay.
So whether he did that under coercion or what, that's to be determined, I suppose. But he probably did cover up the 9/11 incident. He probably did aid in covering up the truth about it.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
And as you know, that was used as a justification for the invasion of Iraq and then the subsequent invasion of other countries in that region and in North Africa. For whatever purpose, I really, we could go on. We could talk about that for hours and hours.
The whole 9/11 thing is, the whole 9/11 thing is just very, it goes all the way to who's really running the world, which is, you mentioned it, the corporate, it's called the Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate, and it's like 300 families or 300 members. I've been talking to a couple other insiders and 300 families. So it's this group that controls all the wealth, all the power, all the politics, everything. They control all the, companies, everything. So what is the goal of that? Are they just trying to wipe it? What George Green says is and he was in the insider meetings back in the 70s. He said they just want to take us down to 500 million people or 500,000 people and just have a depopulation bomb and wipe us out. Is that still in place, or? Well, I mean, I'm not start shifting to the positive, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm not part of that. I'm not part of that inner circle, so I don't really know exactly. But I do know that everybody has their idea of what a perfect world would be like, and some people want it one way, and other people want it another way. I think the truth is that we really have to, if we want a new world, which I think we all want in some form of new world. It seems like a natural evolution in human thinking and desire. We really need to look at, what does God want, not what we want, really. And that's where I would look to for the answers to these questions. And that's where I looked. Okay. That's where I indeed do look to for the answer to these questions. I look in the Bible, which I believe the answer to those questions is clearly answered in the book, but just that most people, don't either don't want to accept it or want to try to impose their own will on everybody else rather than accept what God wants for everybody.
Well, I want to go back to because we have a lot of people of many different religious faiths, so I don't want to go into a religious thing here. Let's go into time travel. Okay. Dr. Lessin, you back? Did you have any questions? Are you back? He had to step out.
Yes, I do have a few questions.
Good.
I've totally studied Andy's works, and I know how he would react to and how he proposes to act on things like immigration, the environment, religious freedom, and things like that. And so that, and I know that what kind of things he would do. So I don't know what you would do if you were president about those areas, about immigration, about the environment, and about religious freedom in the United States.
Right. Yeah, and to tie into that, how do you know the future? So are some of these things set in stone? We've got another 4 years, you're saying, of Trump, so that takes us to 2024. So what all happens between here and there? And then, because we have about half an hour left. So go ahead and answer Sasha's questions. Go ahead.
Okay, so do you want which answer? Sort of what would I do?
Let's start with immigration, because I feel so. My heart goes out to the children that are separated from their parents at the bureau. I would just think people should go where there's jobs, and they should be able to move freely among countries. I don't get where Trumpers are at.
Right. Well, I would then ask you: have you ever lived outside of the United States?
I sure have. I lived in Fiji.
Fiji. Okay. Have you ever lived in a third world country, for instance?
Fiji's at the time was a third world country. Yes.
Really? Were you there for Were you there for a long time?
No, I was there for 18 months, and then I went to Tonga. Anyway, it's not me as much as what I want to know is what if when you're president, what you would do. And Andy's program is so utterly different than Trump's. I don't see. They don't even seem like they're in the same ballpark.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I think you're getting a lot of misinformation about Donald Trump, and that's the truth. I think he's a lot more rational and sound in his thinking than the media are portraying him to be. I think if you actually go directly to the sources that officially represent Donald Trump, not the mainstream media, you will see that there's the mainstream media's version of Trump, and then there's the actual Donald Trump, which is, it's vastly different. And I think
that happens to everybody who gets up there. There's a public perception and persona of everybody. It seems like everybody that gets up there as president, they get a character assassination, and that just seems really hideous to even do that to someone who's supposed to be a public servant and devoting their lives to it. And as soon as they get to the top, they get character assassination, and they're getting bullied for the 4 or 8 years that they're in office, and we have no respect. And that's been, when I was a kid, people used to respect the presidency, but ever since the last 15 years or so, it's just been,
Well, then it's understandable, and that's really understandable. I mean, I think the Bush administration and the Obama administration sort of brought that upon the presidency because of their utterly contemptible behavior, frankly. And, I think that Trump is nothing like the two previous presidents. And this is what people don't understand, is that they're sort of, psychologically imposing their view of the two prior presidents onto Mr. Trump when he's only been in for a short time. He's not really done anything bad for the country, or any other country for that matter. He is trying to fix.
Yeah, well, Michael, I really don't want to focus that much on the politics of the current administration, because it's too controversial. What I'd like to do is talk about your time traveling aspect. And let's just go, because that's not really what people want to talk about. I mean, we could spend years talking about that, but let's just go to you and time travel. And how do you get to know who's going to be the president? How far in the future were you in anything after the work you did with? When did you go to the future? When did you start time traveling again? And what did you see?
Let's see. Well, I've had, since my first experience with, I guess, what we call the reticulans, where I time traveled into very far in the future, not just on Earth, but in other parts of the universe, frankly, all over the universe. I did experience that again, and in order to clarify the specific details of the immediate future being the next 100 years, in my eyes, that being kind of the immediate future for humanity. Excuse me, I have a little heartburn here, but this helped me come to the realization that there are indeed right now time travelers from the future in our present moment and on this planet right now. Human time travelers. And they are...
So how's that working? How did you become aware of them? What happened?
A number of things. And I think if you look... If you really look for the evidence, you'll find it. It's sort of hard to explain, but I think if you're looking for it, you'll certainly find it for yourself. It's almost sort of like... Sorry, there's a lot of noise going on. Is everything okay?
Yeah, everything's okay. Sorry.
Okay. I just sort of feel some hostility and aggression coming from behind you there. Making it difficult for me to talk.
My apologies. Yeah,
it's
Let me
okay.
walk through the room. Okay,
did I upset somebody with my defense of our current president?
You upset a lot of people, but a lot of people are cheering. So I don't go into. I don't really like to talk about politics or religion on that level, the current now, because it's just too hot, and it pisses people off, and so. I just want to stick with like the interesting things like the time travel and all that stuff. So anyway, yeah, it's okay. Let's continue.
Well, it does have a bearing on the future and where things are going. So to me it's all one big ball of wax. You know what I mean? And there's nothing we can really do by getting.
Well, I have to just interject this. When I was 4, I was also in a time travel program, and I was shown 24 different future possibility timelines. And after I was shown them, they went from utter destruction of the earth, to this is become a stardust, all the way to utopian ones. And about 12 were in the negative side, and about 12 were in the positive side. And at the end of it, they said, "You're the chooser. Which one do you choose?" So my understanding is that it's fluid. It's not fixed, and that us as observer participants can choose which track we want to go into. So it is somewhat mutable and changeable. It's not like set in stone.
Right.
That's my understanding. But I was, and I was with, I don't think it was the native Reticulans, although I've interacted with them. It was some outside of the Matrix type, higher level beings were instructing me on what was coming down. And I'm just curious about your experiences. So, I don't really want to see certain timelines, so I'm working to change some things to have a better outcome for most of, for greater proportion of humanity, because I'm a humanitarian, and I don't like to see people in pain, suffering, or manipulated or controlled or, killed or whatever, made sick. All these things are curable. My work with the Secret Space Program, we have cures for all these diseases. We have a time of peace coming, and I would like to insert that in sooner rather than later. And I think it is changeable. That I don't want to see even it's all locking people up. I'd rather they go to rehabilitation. I'm very different than most people. These people can be rehabilitated. Everything was interfered with by other beings that came in for their own agenda. So let's go to that level, the higher level, to create the fix, the win for all. Where we can all be honored as souls and as individuals, and kind of like this was all great big passion play, and yay, you did it, you did your job, you were the catalyst, you made us change. So okay, I'll get off my pulpit. But where I come from. Just who I am. Yeah.
And that's all well and good. I certainly don't have a problem with that, and I can't think of any rational, sane person who would have a problem with that. I think there is the situation that we find ourselves in now. It's almost like we've been in a plane crash, and we need to put the oxygen mask on ourselves first before we can make all these things happen. Because we've been in a plane crash, you know. And this is all that we're seeing happen right now as the result of this plane crash that we've had, and we're just trying to put the oxygen mask on ourselves so that we don't go down with the plane, or don't, you know, so that we can put the parachute on and land on the ground safely, and start thinking about everything else once we've done that. It's important that we don't sort of get too far ahead of ourselves right away, because, you know, we putting the cart before the horse is always, you know, it's never a good thing.
So how do you see us getting out of this mess? Regardless of what political party you are or are not, you know, some people have never voted, like yourself. Right. This is definitely a train wreck. It's a plane crash.
Well, the reason
so many people are suffering and hurting. How do we get to this utopian timeline that respects consciousness and allows us to live in dignity, grace, beauty, and authentic peace? Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the reason I never voted is because by the time I was old enough to vote, I had George H.W. Bush, I had Bill Clinton, I had George W. Bush, and Barack Obama, and I would never have voted for any of those people. And certainly the people who ran against them were much worse. I think it's difficult to understand, but, you know, there's not really a huge difference in recent history between Republicans and Democrats. They all effectively represent the same.
They're all part of the interplanetary corporate conglomerate. They're part of the 300 families, and no one gets to be president that isn't. And that's what I've learned from this. Some people think that this is different, but it isn't. It's the same thing. Yeah. But anyway, that's okay. That's part of the Orwellian game to get us to keep being divisive and start the civil war.
Divided and conquered, right? I agree, and I certainly am not interested in that myself. While right now I don't have a political party affiliation, I will probably be nominated by and accept the nomination from the Republican Party. You know, I mean, but ultimately, in truth, like in absolute truth, I consider myself to be a rational, complete and total centrist, and somebody who I believe will ultimately be able to help people get over their sort of petty, trivial things and unite us all as Americans first, rather than Democrats or Republicans first, because, you know, those parties are just tools that we the people, the American people, you can use to benefit us. We're not there to serve those tools. You know what I mean? So this is where my thinking ultimately lies. I mean, we have to use the tools that we have at our disposal. And for me personally, I would be more than willing to probably use the tool of the Republican Party to get what I and many other Americans, hopefully all of us, can agree on certain things need to get done. And that's all that I hope to accomplish, so that by the time 2028 comes around, whoever has the job by that point will have a much easier time, and whoever has the job in 2032 will have a much easier time. And we want to make it easier for the people who come after us, not harder. You know what I mean? That's
wonderful.
That's how we're going to ensure the survival of humanity, really, and the thriving and prosperity of future generations of people. And
so when you went to the future, did you see how it worked out, like after Trump is done? Does he finish his second term? Does he get ousted? What was the world like after you were done? Did you make a change? What's it like when Andy's done, and then so on and so forth?
Well, I don't think it's wise for me to talk about what Donald Trump is going to do, because he is a free agent and he can choose to do or not do certain things. For me to tell anybody what he's going to do would be disrespectful to his free will and freedom of choice, and I don't wish to impose that upon anybody. But I can tell you with certainty that what I would choose to do with the office of president, and that is a number of things. I will and want to definitely lower the age eligibility for the office of president for a specific reason. I have 2 small children, right? I understand that the nature of American wars and conflicts that we've gotten into, if you really, really think about it and break it down and analyze what's happened, it's because rich old people want young poor people to go off and fight and die and kill to maintain their way of life. Now, I realize that if a young person, say a 21-year-old or 22 or whatever year old, were in the job of President of the United States, they would absolutely choose other than sending their peers off to fight and kill and die in a war. And provided that we allow our younger people the freedom to have that office, to hold that office, I think that it will reduce our government's inclination towards military engagement and conflict where it isn't needed. I think you've seen, time and time again where our government has and our president has engaged the military in war where there was absolutely no need to do so. Look at Iraq. That was not a necessary war by any stretch of the imagination. There was no reason for us to go in there other than Dick Cheney wanted money, George Bush wanted money, a bunch of their cronies wanted to get rich off of the trillions of dollars in our treasury at the time, and so they staged a fake attack on our country that was then used as justification.
That's what's been going on all along. They had a fake attack in World War II. It's always about maintaining wars because that's when the economy surges.
But truthfully, it hasn't always been that way in America. It wasn't that way up until probably World War I. We were simply fighting to maintain our right to exist as a nation, and we weren't engaged in foreign wars of aggression. We weren't sticking our nose in here and there and everywhere.
When we had intervention by extraterrestrials, the modern era of intervention. We had the ancient aliens, but then the modern era was this Guerrero and the Nazi, those who started to influence the Nazis. That's why by the time World War II was come upon us, we had the Foo Fighters. And so we're re-getting that history of what happened but it did become very political. It was about money and control, manipulation.
Right.
So anyway,
And in 1913, when the Federal Reserve Act came in, it became all about banking and money and control and setting up central banks in countries around the world and using the U.S. military as a mercenary force in order to make that happen. Now, we need to stop doing that. We cannot maintain that way of doing things. It's unsustainable. It's really bad for our country. It makes the entire world hate America.
Exactly. So how would you do that besides lowering the voting age? What are some of the things? Because I'm sorry to rush it. We're running out of time. We have like 10, 15 minutes left. Yeah, go ahead.
I think lowering the voting age will reduce that inclination significantly. I think also reaching out to specifically, I think reshaping the way our intelligence mechanism works. I mean, we rely on, for instance, British intelligence to gain insight into how we should conduct our foreign policy. That is absurd. We should not be relying on a country that fought several wars with ours and did not even want our country to exist in the first place for intelligence. It's counter. It's completely insensible. We should restructure our intelligence mechanism and gain intelligence about what's going on around the world directly from Americans in those places, not from foreign intelligence agencies who are going to lie to us and manipulate us, and have been doing so for probably 100 years at this point. We need to stop doing that. What else would I do in order to reduce that? I had a couple of other ideas. They're eluding me right now because of the time constraints.
Yeah, we can revisit all this another time. But what I wanted to get in before we run out of time is that you alluded to earlier that there comes a point where it'll be safe for technology to be released. And then also I wanted to know, when do we get to know about extraterrestrials and their interactions with humanity?
I think we're starting to know that now, don't you? I think it's all been a gradual process.
Yeah, it's soft disclosure, but do we actually have more hard disclosure when they start walking among us and we start actively interacting or trading with them?
Well, I think what will happen is it'll be on an individual basis. I mean, they probably won't make their presence known to anyone who is hostile or aggressive, because you know that is something they really don't like about humanity, and they certainly wouldn't give us any more access to advanced technology that they have if we continue to treat each other in a poor manner. So really, another thing I guess then that we would need to do is also reach out to countries like Russia and start to build, trade alliances with them and work more in partnership with countries like Russia, who, if you know Russian people, they are fantastic human beings, and they're more like Americans than Americans are now. You know what I mean? It's like they're much more.
Right.
They've become more American than America in the last 20 years.
Yeah. America tends to Americanize the whole world. Our culture is infectious. It just gets out there, and people want to be Americans no matter where they are.
Right.
Yeah. I have a question.
Sure.
Real quick. On Apex TV, I spent a couple of evenings watching everything, and they said that by 2028, time travel will be released to the public, and actually sometimes people can tell us about that.
Well, certainly in 4 years, I know for a fact that I would be able to clear up any issues that would prevent time travel from becoming public. So definitely in my last year of my 4 years, I would certainly be able to sign off on declassifying that and making it public, because there won't be any risk involved in doing so. That I am certain of. I know I have that ability and that level of focus on and determination to fix the problems that would prevent it from becoming a public time travel being a public institution. We can have public time travel tours and this kind of thing. If you want to go to, say, the year 3000 and stay there where the technology is much better and you can extend your life to forever and ever if you want to, by all means, go ahead. If you want to go live in, 1810 when it was much simpler, by all means, go ahead. You'll be able to have your choice, Personally, I want to go to 3000 and never come back, but...
have you been to 3000?
I have, yeah. And here's something else I'm aware of, is the fact that I will be president again at a later point. I am basically going to be the second Grover Cleveland.
Mm-hmm. So that also, like you said, Arnold will be present. So do we have physical longevity, extreme longevity by then? Because these people are going to be really ancient by...
Arnold will be about 90. Arnold will be about 90 by then. So he'll be an old man, but he'll still, he's healthy. He's a tough man. He's a tough guy. And
I also extend our life expectancy, because the secret space program says that we already have cures for all the diseases. We can actually rejuvenate people that have died. They can bring them back through these chambers or the rejuvenation tanks where they're put into liquids. Are we going to have those type of technologies?
Well, those technologies, it's certainly possible. I don't really know. But because of time travel, those things will certainly be easy to access, whether they're in our present time or in the future, because those things will definitely exist at some point in the future. Whether we develop them as humans ourselves or we obtain them from another species who has already developed them, we will have those things in the future. I don't know at what point humanity obtains that sort of technology. I haven't had access to that information, but because of time travel, we will by default have access to that technology. Another interesting point, I know two other presidents. I know them personally.
Yes, who are they?
I know them personally. One of them is my currently 5-year-old son, Alexander Michael Macintosh, and the other is my currently 9-year-old daughter, Emmeline Grace Macintosh. They will both serve consecutive 8-year terms.
Wow.
And I have to tell you, they are absolutely wonderful people. They are the most caring, kind, considerate, thoughtful little people you will ever meet. And I hope you get to meet them.
Yeah. Well, I saw your daughter on one of the videos. She's cute. I saw your son in the other one too. So, what are we expecting in the future? We have about 3 minutes. Yeah, go ahead.
That little girl will be president for 8 years in 2060. And my son will be president in 2052 for 8 years. And then there will be another person after that, and then I will be president again for 4 years when I'm, I think, about 80 or 90. So.
Wow.
Yeah. It's going to be very interesting.
Why did they ask you if you were Irish? Do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, I do. I think it, like you were saying, it might have to do with my genetic. You said the Irish have a special genetic proclivity. Well, I certainly believe that. Having spent a lot of time with, my mom, who was right from Ireland, there's just something very different about the genetic makeup of Celtic Irish people, of which I have a great deal of Celtic Irish DNA. Definitely more.
So do I.
Yeah, we're definitely more predisposed towards things like parapsychological abilities and extrasensory, all of those abilities like extrasensory perception and astral projection and these kinds of things. These are sort of, I don't know how DNA works, but it just seems like there's something in our DNA that makes it easier for people with this genetic background to do those kinds of things. And those are very useful tools, I suppose, to the United States government that maybe other ethnic groups don't as readily have the ability to access.
This is our last minute. What would you like to tell our listeners before you comes on?
Sure. Just that I really don't want to be president, and I think that you're gonna want me to be president though, because it's either me or Oprah Winfrey or Kanye West or somebody really awful. So I don't really want the job, but I'll happily accept it because to spare you guys from the misery that having those people as your president would bring about.
Thank you so much, Michael. Fascinating show. Thank you, listeners. Much love and blessings. Aloha.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we are listener-sponsored and commercial-free. But there still are bills to pay. In order to raise some needed funds to cover the cost, our station is offering a silver special. In the continental United States for a $60 donation, or in Alaska, Hawaii, or Canada for a $70 donation, we will send you an uncirculated 2018 1-ounce pure silver Eagle. The $70 donation, the extra 10 is to cover shipping, by the way, outside of the continental United States. When making the donation, you must put Silver Eagle promo in the notes on the donation. And thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio and freedomslips.com. Without you, there is no us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.